Hey everyone, today I'm going to go through the basics of 3D modeling software, what a 3D model is made of, how to manipulate the components it's made out of, as well as creating different 3D objects. In the end, we'll practically apply this knowledge by creating a simple Imperial Star Destroyer. It'll be our first project. So pretty much every digital character or game or movie environment you've ever seen on screen could have been produced with this software 3ds Max. So it's really powerful. It's really only limited by your knowledge and your skills, and has the potential to create anything you can imagine. So go ahead and download that for free. And once we've got that, we'll open it up. We'll just take a second. So you're going to be a little overwhelmed by maybe what you see. It'll feel like you're a pilot in the pilot's cockpit for the first time. And there's a lot of buttons that we won't be working with today. We'll just be working with the very basics, get you moving around the environment. So you'll see here we have 4 viewports. We'll only be working in one today. So go ahead and click down here in the bottom right, and we'll just maximize this viewport to take up the whole space. So we start with the camera focus right on the middle. If you want to move around, just hold the middle mouse button. It'll pan you left, right, up, and down. Or hold the Alt middle mouse button, and you can orbit around the camera's view. So let's get started. Let's create our first very simple object. We can go up here to the Create tab, go under Standard Primitives, a box, and just click and drag. Starts at the corner. This will give you the length and the width of the object. As soon as you let go, it'll give you the height of the object. You can also do that same thing over here under the Standard Primitives, and just select any of these objects. Same thing. Drag out a box, whatever shape you want to go with. And down here in parameters, you can, after the object is created, you can manipulate the length, width, and height, and also enter in numbers manually. So we're going to go ahead and create a perfect cube here. To move this cube around, or move any object around, you can use the W, E, and R hotkeys to move, rotate, and scale an object. You can also Control Z to undo those, and those buttons are just right up here with the move, rotate, and scale. So for any 3D model, every 3D model you make, you'll want it to be at the very middle, the origin point, so that when that model gets moved over to a game engine or anything else, the person on that side can see that the object is right there in the middle for them. So instead of dragging it out and trying to see it with just trying to eyeball it, let's manually set each of these numbers down here, the X, Y, and Z coordinates of this object, to 0. So you can manually enter 0, or you can just go ahead and right-click the little arrows here, and that will set it to 0 for you. Okay, so what is this object made of? You may be wondering, how do you create stuff? How do you change this thing? We've played with the length, the width, and the height and such, but how do we really get into it? So we'll want to make this editable, an editable object. We'll convert it to an editable poly. Now on the right here, you'll see that we have a bunch of new options. Go ahead and minimize all those tabs, because we only need to worry about the selection for now. So we have 5 options here. We'll be looking at 3 of them. We've got the vertexes, the edges, and the faces. Now this should be very similar to probably a math class you've taken at some point. So the verts would be where the edges line up, highlighted in red here. The edges are where all the faces meet. And then the faces are just the individual polygons that make up the object. And you can manipulate all these things in the same way. You can click and drag to select a bunch, or you can just click one of these. You can click and drag, you can rotate them, or maybe you can't. Yes, you need to select at least more than one to be able to rotate them. And you can manually drag the faces out and manipulate them that way. So for our project, we're going to turn this cube into a Star Destroyer. So we're going to start by getting the general shape of the Star Destroyer. If for whatever reason you don't know what a Star Destroyer is, this is what we're going for from Star Wars. It's kind of like a long triangular shape. I guess a pizza slice would be a good way to describe it. So let's simply start by making this a little more thin and then dragging these out a little bit. So when working in 3ds Max, you can change the views. So right now I'm just kind of going around, orbiting my own way around the middle here. We also have this handy cube up here, which can set it to the perfect front, top, side views. And we're going to switch that to the top view. So you can also just press T, make sure this is set to default shading. Wherever you are, you can press T and it will bring you right to the object. If for any reason you get lost, you lose your object in the scene, you have no idea where you are, just press Z and that will bring you right back to whatever is selected. In this case, this face, or it could be the whole object. So let's move to our top view and start forming the pizza slice triangular shape of the Star Destroyer. So we'll say that this side here is going to be our front view, and this is going to be the back of the ship. So the front is pointed pretty sharply here, so what I'm doing is you can go ahead and select these verts, or from the top view, just drag out. It'll get any verts in that square. And we'll just drag it in, make it a very narrow, pointy front. You can already see the shape of the Star Destroyer is kind of coming together a little bit. For the back here, we'll select this face, and normally your first thought might be, let's just pull this back. But you'll notice on the ship, it actually has a back section that comes back into the middle of the ship. So we want this edge to stay here. So we'll select these two edges here, the two back edges, and then we'll select the two front edges, and we'll hit the connect tool down here under edit edges. Now that just creates a loop around the middle of the object. Go ahead and click that check mark. And now we have additional geometry to work with. Another command we're going to use is the extrude tool. So when you click the extrude tool, it just means that whatever faces you have selected, you'll be extruding from those faces. So you can see it's like the move tool, except we keep that geometry. So we'll say maybe we'll extrude this by 20 centimeters. And then we'll go to our top view and we'll pull these in to the middle just like we did with the front. And that's kind of the general shape. If you want to get fancy, now that we have this middle vertex here, we can pull that up. And for the bottom view, we'll grab that bottom vert and do the same thing, and we'll pull that down. So here's what it looks like from the right-hand side view. So that's the general shape of the body. Now, the only thing left to do is really to create the bridge. So we're going to shift-click and drag this guy up. That'll create a copy of it, and we'll just call it box 2 for now. That's okay. We're just learning. And we'll scale that in. So the shape of the bridge is actually kind of the shape of the whole ship. So by copying, making it smaller with the scale tool, and centering it, we've already created the layers of the Star Destroyer. Now you can go into as much detail as you want. The top of the bridge has some spheres, and it also has a couple of kind of cube shapes, so we can easily make those. Let's go ahead and just make a cube. If I'm going too fast here, you can just pause the video and play with this on your own if you want. So all I'm doing is just playing with the parameters, getting the general shape of the bridge here. And feel free to just look back at the Star Destroyer reference anytime you want. So all I'm doing here is I'm creating this neck piece, and then I'll be creating the actual bridge piece and some details on top. So for the neck piece, we're just going to make a thin rectangular prism shape, and then we can copy that up, and we will make a wider shape here, maybe a little thinner on top. And if we want to add a little more detail, we can give it an additional height segment that just adds an extra loop, just like the connect tool. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing to make it an editable poly as we did with the main body. Let's get our front view. And just like the body, we can pull these in a little bit, or we can pull them out. Get any kind of shape you want to go with. And then there's this mini supporting bridge. And let's go ahead and add some spheres to it for some final detail. And we're just playing with shapes. This isn't to scale at all. We're just getting moving in the environment. I'm going pretty fast here. If you want to select multiple objects, we can click one and then control click the other and control click as many objects as you want, and it will select all of them. And to deselect any of them, just click anywhere where there is no objects in the viewport. And we'll just drag these down a little bit. Just make sure you're always set to default shading so you can see the models. And F4 brings up wireframe, which shows you the edges of the objects. Very handy for actually seeing what you're doing. If we want to add some extra detail here, we can grab one face here, control click, or just grab one face here and shift click. That'll grab all the objects in a ring around the object. Another tool here is the inset tool that creates faces within the faces, and it'll create the edges and verts to go along with it. So we'll just inset those by maybe 1, and then extrude those by maybe -1. Or we'll push that maybe a little more to negative, we'll say -5. There we go, that's kind of the shape of the ship. You can continue cutting in as much detail as you'd like. I encourage you to try this multiple times, maybe use a different, explore a few different ways of getting those shapes. And that's about it for the Star Destroyer. It looks pretty close. Obviously, it's nowhere near the level of detail, but this is just a basic tutorial to get you started. So I encourage you to keep going with this. Play with the shapes, play with more objects. You can create as many objects as you like. Over here on the plus symbol, we've got your box, we've got spheres, we've even got a teapot. And just go ahead and play with those and mess around with whatever you want to mess around with and learn. The skill really comes with the time, and you can put as much time into this as you want. Like I said, every character in a movie, every building you see in the background of an Avengers movie, that was all modeled in 3ds Max or a similar software. And this knowledge should transfer to pretty much any 3D modeling software on the market you can find. So yeah, that's our Star Destroyer for today. Some basic modeling tips, and yeah, thanks for watching.